Hello, hello. It's Wednesday. We're here with Ricky Williams, and Ricky and I are going to be looking into this book on critical race theory, why it matters and why you should care. Okay. Do you care about race theory, Ricky?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't know how to answer that question, if I'm being honest.
I'm starting to care because our project that we have is really making me care about it. Like I feel like we could really move mountains in keeping the story going. Um,
I'll say where I do care about it as a philosopher, and I think race is such a powerful thing, and I think if we can utilize it, you know, to understand ourselves and the world better, and this theory can help us do that, and I'm all for it.
yeah. Okay, so no, this is just random. I just underlined some things. I read this like months ago, so I haven't even looked at what I underlined, but I'm just gonna give us a sentence in the book as a prompt, and then we're just gonna speak to that randomly. Okay.
Yeah.
So the first sentence I have underlined is there's a seemingly endless series of videos of police violence against unarmed black men. Okay. So how can we as astrologers help in the equation of police violence against unarmed black men?
First place comes to my mind is individual, a community, um, a town, a city, a country's relationship to Mars.
Okay.
Uh,
Like how so?
Well, because when someone hears about brutality, okay, they hear a story about brutality. That once it goes into brutality, right, it's being filtered essentially through that person's Mars,
Right.
meaning they're that person's past experiences and attitudes created based on those experiences about Mars.
So I guess police violence could come from police officers having unbridled Mars problems. A lot of police officers are probably martial, don't you think?
Yeah, I think you have to be a good police officer. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. So, I think, can you imagine a world of police officers where they were also spiritual masters? Like they knew how to do toning and like run their Mars energy with like mantras and, tones and stuff like that. Can you imagine a bunch of balanced police officers?
I think I mean, for me, when I think of that in a more grounded sense, the image I get is, that the police force had to do 5 hours of Tai Chi and Qigong each week,
Yeah.
right? Channeling their Mars Chi, right? Because, right, the idea in it's the martial arts imagery is that the warrior never has to strike or never has to fight, you know? Then this is part of Mars too, right? First as a defender, right? As a defender. And yes, we understand that we are willing to do whatever it takes, right? And there will be collateral damage, but the real skilled swordsman, right, never has to draw a sword.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I feel like the police brutality question comes partially from the brutality of uninformed baby uses of the chart. You know what I mean? Like that's why I called people an oyster cracker. I was like these police officers who are oyster crackers, which are like tiny babies spiritually. It's like a lot of police
Yeah.
officers probably don't have any kind of martial arts training or like didn't have a sensei or all these things. And so when they get mad, they just have justified or they feel like they have justified anger and can just lash out. I mean, we can't say all police officers ubiquitously. I mean, I'm sure there are really wise police officers.
Well, I mean, this is where we can watch any good police officer movie, and we can learn a whole lot about Mars, right? And we see it in different contexts, but mainly in the police movies, we're seeing the Mars in an 11th house context, right? Is a group of Mars people get together, and because of that, certain things come out of it, right? Sometimes the pressure to be the bad cop, but I'm going to stand up and be the good cop, and what happens, right? All of that. And when I say the history, because again, brutality gets me onto Mars, and I said the history of our own personal relationship to Mars. But when we're talking about an institution like law enforcement, especially related to African Americans, there's a history of there's a Martian history about that brutality against African Americans that's at almost at the root of police forces in the country. So it's a long history of uh, uh, publicly sanctioned outlet of Mars energy that gets to be directed towards African Americans.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, I mean, I feel like there is something to be said for like lashing out in fear. It's like I feel like sometimes these police officers lash out because they're like afraid of African males. Like why is that? It must be conditioning, like cultural conditioning in movies and films or like am I on a line to say that these police officers do it? Because like a lot of times police officers lash out when they think they're going to get shot or they think they're going to, but
Yeah. Well, I imagine, and I've been in the situation of, I'm in an urban area of a big city, and it's cold outside, and I have my jacket on, I might have a hood on or a beanie on, and I'm walking by, a white lady walking by herself, and she might cross the street, or she might clutch her purse, or I I get it. If I was walking, if I was walking down the street and but and a lot of that comes from the images we see on the news and what we see on television, right? And most people's experience, it's changing, but a lot of times most white people's most experience they've had with black people is on television,
yeah.
right? They don't have, like, they haven't been into their house, they haven't had personal interactions. So it's kind of the other. And if you don't haven't been trained in how to do the otherness, then you don't have the training. And so all you have is your fear. And for a long time in humanity's history, that fear kept us alive. Right? So
Yeah.
I can appreciate where it's coming from.
It makes me think of those four layers of, development. We have the genetics of a person, the culture, climate, and the chart. Well, I think the culture and climate that we're growing up in America teach us people to fear African, males because but then like gang videos are interesting or like rap videos because a lot of times there'll be like gun violence in gang videos, and it's like that might scare people, and so it's like, how much should we be trying to like minimize scary imagery? I don't know. What do you think of that?
So, if we think of Mars and there's a statement and it's true. I think it's more true than we're comfortable with, right? But it's hard to imagine being African American in this country and not being pissed off.
Yeah.
Right? It's because there's a whole lot to be pissed off. So if you keep people in a pissed off mode, right, they're going to have a tendency to express Mars energy more, not because it's inherent in their nature, but it's inherent in the way that they're being treated. And to
Interesting.
me, that's at the very root of what it means to be an African American, because they put you in chains and throw you on a ship and say that we own you, right? If that doesn't piss you off, then you're not alive.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. It's like I see how you're bringing it down to Mars because like it's that martial rage that rises up in African cultures and makes these gang videos, which is a beautiful expression of Mars. I mean, to express it through art is actually the right way. Like we should commend, that culture for doing that. But then so yeah, you're right. I guess we're into conflict theory here, and it makes me think of the PowerPoint. I read the Philosopher's Magazine, the New Philosopher, on the conflict episode of that magazine, and it was just, I mean, I feel like it comes back to conflict theory of like if there's a conflict between police and somebody, if it's an African male, there's more likely to be a lashing out than if it was a white male because of all these fears. But like we could look at it from the heart of conflict theory, like how can we reduce the conflict between police officers and black culture? Or we could look at it as like how could we change the culture that we're living in so people have less fear? I mean, there could be a lot of remedies for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, I just lately I've been on this history kick. I think what could help is really understanding the history of how these things came about. And when I say history, and I think of it in an astrological sense, the history of Mars, right? Like, what is Mars? What are the constructive ways of expressing it? What are the destructive ways of expressing it? How can we recognize when it's moving into this destructive ways and start channeling them into more constructive ways? Because to me, regardless of what is going on, if that's the attitude, you're going to be able to do to make a better response to police brutality, to any form of Mars showing up.
What do you think about guns in general in Mars? Like, do you think people should have access to guns on Mars transits?
I mean, if I was coming, if I was creating regulations around it, I'd say if you have hard aspects to your Mars, that you have to go through specific training.
Oh, snap. Oh my God, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Oh my God, 1 point for Ricky Williams.
yeah, hmm
Yeah, like if you have a Mars trine, you can just have a gun.
yeah. Exactly. You can just have one. Yeah, please take them all.
Shit, that's fucking funny. Oh, sorry. You know, it's the guy with like Mars and Aries conjunct the moon and Pluto that has like an arsenal of guns too.
But to me, we see hard aspects, but to me, what activates hard aspects is a bad attitude. So right, I have to have like one of those things you put on someone's pulse that in order for them to be able to unholster the gun, right? They had to have a certain amount of calm, right? They had to have a good attitude.
That is freaking amazing. Oh
a
my
mood
God.
ring, a mood ring that releases the holster.
Oh my God. Like, you can only shoot your gun when you're really happy. Like, why guns even, there's no good use of a gun. Like, what the heck? Oh.
Well, so part of Mars is, it's funny. I was talking to someone, and they were making fun of me, astrologically, and I was talking about Mars, and they said, yeah, when I haven't eaten and when I missed a meal, and I said, actually, that is Mars, because if you think about Mars, right, if you were hungry, that's going to motivate you to climb that tree to get the coconut or to run down that run down that animal.
When you're hangry, you're more likely to go looking for food.
Exactly, to go kill something, right? But that it's like in the cartoons, when they're hungry and their friends turn into to a turkey.
Oh my God, that's
but,
funny.
but you don't see, even if they get the turkey, right? They still have to carve it up, or they have to rip it apart with their teeth.
True, that is. I never thought that, but eating is a very martial act. You're ripping flesh. Whoa. Oh, Ricky.
Hunting is too. So it
Oh,
comes back to the question of why guns, right? Why projectile objects? Okay, because I'm hungry.
that's true. That's true. Eat a salad, Ricky. Eat a salad. Okay. All right, here's our next sentence. There is highly variable treatment received by family members of different hues. Okay, do you agree or disagree?
What does that mean?
Like in a family, let's say there was so she says, my personal history primed me to understand critical race theory because I had witnessed the highly variable treatment received by family members of different hues. Because I'm
Oh,
right as
wow.
white, I heard the ways white people thinking they were alone sometimes spoke about people of color. These interactions included the relatively subdued racism that's common in American culture, like making jokes and things like that. So you live in a mixed race family, right?
Mhm.
So do you feel like people in your family are treated differently according to their skin color?
So here's what I've noticed. Okay, when I moved to New Orleans, and I noticed that in New Orleans, depending on how dark someone's skin color, they're more likely to be in a service position, where the lighter skin colored people were the attorneys, the doctors. It wasn't across the board, but there was definitely like a trend. And also like the way they're like, I don't think anyone was really conscious of it, but there was kind of this interesting like hierarchy. And it goes back to slavery. And I think the training, and there was so much money and energy and propaganda in the Sambo image, right? In making black less than, inferior, wrong. So it's so much because so much energy was put into it. It's part of what it's part of, unfortunately, it's part of what it means to be African American. It's part of what it means to be American, is that we have to wrestle with those images. It's like when someone puts a lot of time and energy to impress something in us, those impressions are real. They don't just disappear. They don't just disappear by themselves. And I think we all have a personal responsibility to root out those images. But it's easier when we don't take them personally and think we're bad or we think we're wrong because we have them, but to appreciate how they got in there. And that helps us appreciate the kind of images that we need to create, generate ourselves, and for other people to help supplant those images with ones that are more accurate, that are
Yeah.
more life giving.
Interesting. Yeah, I love that. I love what you're saying, that's just kind of, it can be cultural coming into your family from the culture that's around you. You know, it's like maybe you and your wife equally regard both of you, no matter the skin color, but like the culture around you kind of like also has its way with each of you. And yeah,
I will
I
say though,
agree with you there.
I will say, and something interesting is my first wife. She grew up in Arkansas. She grew up in the South, you know, and I could realize that based off her friends and the N-word comments that she heard growing up is right part of her, right, that she still somehow was able to overcome that. I mean, I'm sure getting pregnant probably helped, but she was still able to overcome that, and we got married, you know. But I could still sense sometimes it was hard for her, and multiple reasons. I'm a guy or whatever, but I think being African American, I felt like there was some internal unconscious block about how intelligent I could be. And
Interesting.
not that but it's not that I'm not intelligent, but not to brag, but I just have a lot of free time to think about stuff. So I'm more intelligent than the average person. And I have a unique kind of intelligence. So it's like some things that I would say in her mind, there was like a point, and again, it could be other stuff, but I felt like sometimes there was a point where she was like, there's no way this person could be that intelligent.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
Surprisingly intelligent. That's what you are.
But I get that a lot, right? You're articulate for a black guy, right, or for an athlete. It's always couch, or I mean, I'm
You're really
kind of grown.
articulate for a hot ass motherfucker.
All right, perfect. But as I've gotten older, I've been through stuff publicly, so you know I get a little bit more benefit of the doubt. But but still, and again, I don't blame people because most of the experiences that we have with the other race come from images created by entertainers.
Yeah, interesting. I'm sorry I swore.
No, no, please. I like it.
Okay. Well, no, I think that's interesting that like where it's like we make assumptions. This is where like my students always wanted me to like admit I was a racist or something. Like this is one of the ways that we get out of racism is like to admit that we're racist or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that because I'm just not racist. Like I know that maybe that's uncouth or whatever, but it's like I'm an astrological extremist. I'm like how intelligent a person depends 100% on their chart. Like you can have like 10 planets in Gemini and be a black dude and you are super nerdy. You know what I mean? Like it's like but I think the astrology in some ways busts up a lot of those cultural things that we're trained to because it's like I see the chart first, you know what I mean? But it's like I do hear what you're saying is like a lot of people do, but I do think like if like when we think of the strongest black man and the strongest white man, like I think we think that the black man is stronger than the strongest white man.
Yeah. Huh?
But if you're thinking about the most intelligent white man and the most intelligent black man, you definitely kind of culturally think that the white guy is going to win. Like, why is that?
Well, it was because it's because of the images and it's because of history, right? If you think of why we think the strongest black man, it's because like we beat the shit out of this dude for 200 years and he's still here. He must be stronger than us. Right, and then they're like, "But he was so dumb that he stayed in captivity for 250 years, so we must be smarter than him."
Oh my God. I'm like, whoever has more AI is smarter. No, I don't.
Oh, right.
Well, do you think that astrology kind of busts up racism in some ways where it's like we look at the chart, like it doesn't like
I think it can bust it up, but I think what it does first is it gives us the ability to amplify it.
Yeah.
Because if we look at it, because people, astrologers, right, or astrologisms, okay, is that the ism is that there's already assumptions built into the chart, and it's like, but if you're not viewing those assumptions through someone's race, meaning their past experiences, it's like you're going to completely miss something. You know?
Okay, thank you for reminding me that intersections of race and culture are ultimately important as astrologers. Because you're right, because even if somebody has 10 planets in Gemini, they still grew up in a culture assuming that they're not
Exactly.
intelligent.
But there you go.
Okay.
100%. And if you miss that, you would miss something massive.
Yeah.
Massive.
Well,
It's
Nick
not the
Ptolemy says
same
this.
thing. Yeah.
Ptolemy says this in the Tetrabiblos. He says, just like a doctor, we should be looking at like all the influences on the person, whether it be that where they're living, with the house they're living, or the culture they're like. And so it's like if we miss that, it would be like missing like that the person's sitting with their like if I don't know. It's just like external influences is part of the prescription of a chart, and I just we can't forget that.
Yeah. An example, if you see a lot of strong Aquarius or Uranus stuff in a chart, you would say someone is the outsider. But if someone, right, you don't know, are they an outsider in the like larger group? Are they like over identify with being a minority, or are they an outsider inside of that minority group? Right? You don't know unless you know the environment. You just know that there's a certain internal experience that they are having that is mirrored in the external environment, but those
That's so
external
true.
environments are all going to be different. We don't know.
Yeah, like if they're a Gemini, it's like we know that they're smart, but it's like smart about what? Well, that
Yeah,
depends on where they're living or in what they're,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Yeah. What's the information? What are the perceptions that are in their immediate environment that are fueling their intelligence?
Yeah. Okay, okay, good talk, good talk. Okay, okay, here's another sentence for you. White folks seem to know what was best for people of color. Well, okay, she's saying a kind of smug paternalism that assumed that white folks knew what was best for people of color. Do you feel like white people feel like they know what's best for you?
Well, I understand where the statement comes from, and if we understand the history, if I own you, then by, by definition, I know what's best for you because if you don't do what's best for you, I can do whatever I want to you. So it's not it's we've outgrown it, but we have to acknowledge that that was the reality for a long time.
Yeah, that's a slavery reality. Like being
Yeah,
like, I know what you need. Like that's
yeah.
all.
But even if you think right, if we get people and bring them over here from Africa and they don't speak the language, they don't know like of course we know what's best for them until they right understand the lay of the land, they speak the language, they become literate, they don't right, they figure it out. That's why it says paternal, right? Kids don't know anything until they get old enough to figure it out, and they do need some parental people around to help navigate that. And some of us had kind, loving, compassionate parents, some of us had tyrants, so
Yeah, they
right
say
when
you
we
can die at the hands of your caregiver. Hold on.
yeah, exactly. So when we say paternal, we say paternal, right? It's a real experience of we don't choose our parents, and sometimes my God, we get wonderful ones, and sometimes we don't. So, but the idea of taking people who were living close to the land in what the right and what Western people would say is uncivilized, right, is because their concerns were more earth based. They didn't have slaves so that they could philosophize about all these other things. So when they came to America, and if the ideal is they're supposed to become quote unquote civilized or American, then the people, the tutors, mentors, the shepherds, right? Yes, okay, they can help facilitate the process of of us becoming Americanized. Yeah.
Hmm. I think the lesson of this sentence is don't be a smug paternalist. Like I don't care who you are, don't be a smug, but like it's never good to be smug, really.
Of course, but I think but I don't want to shame being paternal, because there are people who are paternal, and we can't make them wrong. It's like any talking to any parents, right? Be a good parent, but recognize when your kids are grown up and they don't need you. You
Yeah,
know?
because like
Ah,
we want you to be paternal. You have 6 kids. Like we want you to be acting paternal. Or like Capricorns are very paternal,
yeah,
And
yeah.
like that's well, I mean, people even fetishize that stuff, like daddy.
But even if we say paternal and we go to an ideal of what is paternalism is the children love their father, right? And if the and if we're seeing that, right, all the African Americans are saying how much they love the white men, right, then we can say they're good parents, right? But that's not what we see.
But white people are not supposed to be your parent. You'd be like, you're not the boss of me, and you're not my dad.
But that's not true. But for a majority of us, that's the history. That's where we come from. That's what I'm saying. We can't just say it's not supposed to. We can say it's not supposed to be like that, but we have to understand how we got here so that we can take the necessary steps to untangle these things and right for all of us to act right as we would like to be seen.
hmm Yeah. I think it's good for people to have agency, all races should have equal agency, to be like, I am my own agent of myself. And like white people are not over black people are not over white people. It's like no one's a smug paternalist over anyone. Like we're all equalists, But I mean, I don't know.
Oh, 100%. I agree. No, I 100% agree, of course. Of course, but that's the American dream, right? That we're all free, right? And no one should be able to have power over us that we don't give to them.
Well,
But
have you ever heard of that thing? There's like power over structures, there's power with, and there's power under. Have you heard of that?
yeah.
Like I think our generation with our Pluto and Libra, we're like power with. Like you and I are definitely like approaching this talk show equally. Like I don't feel like either of us is in control of the other person. I know I open the room, but like you know what I mean? That's about all I do that and post the video, but that doesn't mean that I'm in control,
But I think our generation, part of it is we appreciate, and it's a little dark. We appreciate the mutual nature of control and real partnership. It's not that you don't control me and I don't control you. It's sometimes you need to take the reins. Sometimes it's better if I take the reins. And the more we can appreciate that for each other, the more we both feel appreciated and the more partnership we have, and the less we're using that control to gain control, right? It's about using it because we realize there's something we can do together that we can't do apart.
Yeah, yeah. There's one person who treats me like a smug paternalist, and I don't like him. Like there's like some contention over theoretics and astrology, and I have a piece of the puzzle, and so the crowd always wants me to solve that piece of the puzzle. And when I talk to this person about it, he's like, "Well, if you wanted to know what was going on, you should have asked me." I'm like, "You don't have you can't read Greek." Like it's hard to explain, but it's like I have been treated in a smug maternal way, and like I'm an alpha, and I'm just like, "Yeah, no, thanks on that." Like I'm not participating.
This is why I say race and gender because right, we're different, but there is something that the African American and the white woman have in common.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I never.
I think we got to vote before you guys. Yeah, we got to vote before before you guys did.
Whatever. Whatever. I will never be. I'm not. I'm just like a rise up. I'm just like, if someone victimized me, I'd be like, yeah, no, thanks on that. I wasn't victimized. No, I wasn't. Like,
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm exactly the same way.
oh my God. Okay. This is kind of fun. It's like really random when we just
Yeah,
read one sentence at a time. Okay.
yeah.
She said, um, critical race theorists also criticize liberals' tepid acceptance of diversity on unequal terms, such as organizational policies that avoid confronting racialized power and resource differences in the workplace. Okay, that's a lot. But okay,
Ooh,
let's look
yeah.
at resource differences between Africans and white people. What do you think about that? Is there resource differences?
Um, I, I think if we're talking about socioeconomic differences, there's numbers, but I think the one thing that I can talk about is um I'll call the resource of um confidence. or the resource of agency. It's
Mhm.
like I imagine white people in history class, you know, or just in most things we do, right? It's like, yeah, they're talking to me, they're talking to me. And if you're African American, it's like sometimes you can feel like it's kind of talking to you. Sometimes you're like, I'm not sure if it's talking to me. And then other times you're like a positive, that ain't talking about us. No,
Yeah.
I think that's a resource, right? There's this kind of I think African Americans this like constant self doubt that at any time, right, because of the color of your skin, that your agency can be taken away from you or you can be discounted. And I think that that's a massive resource of self confidence.
Yeah, and that's where like manifestation theory teaches people to rise above stuff like that, where it's like make sure that you have, your highest mental formation of yourself in your mind so that no one can ever take your agency from you and stuff like that. But I think people have to be taught to rise above conceptually, by somebody.
But even that idea, right? That Right. I imagine that idea comes from a white person who already is starting at a certain level when they say that and not having an appreciation for where other people are starting from, or that there are other people that are starting from a different place. Because that makes us feel uncomfortable, right? To acknowledge that we have an advantage over other people. It's like it's uncomfortable because do we have a responsibility to do more? Or do we have a responsibility to help? I mean, I get it.
Hmm. Yeah, well, let's talk about the concept that money buys happiness. Because, like, there's this whole idea that, African Americans have less money than white people, and that's part of like the oppression here. And I think some people will be like, well, money doesn't buy happiness, but there is actually a number. It's like 74,000 or something like that. Like, where if you make less than 74,000 a year, like, you're actually less happy than people make past this number. But once you get past that number, no amount more of money will make you any more happy. But I think where money does buy happiness is like from a teleologist theory and a development theorist. Let's say you have a transit, right, Ricky? And it's like you go into like this mania where you're like, I need to grow as an astrologer, right? So then you need astrology books in order to grow as an astrologer. So we need some money. Well, you could get them from the library, but let's say you want planets in transit as a reference book. Like we need some money to buy you that book, right? And I think there is something to be said for people who have enough money to keep developing rapidly are less oppressed than people who don't have the resources to develop rapidly. And I think that's where I wish everybody had enough money.
Wow. Yeah. Based on my own personal experience, which, is there's going to be a lot of ignorance in what I say, but I almost think it's like a rite of passage because I was listening to Booker T. Washington, and just the Cliff Notes here is that there are like two major components in after the Reconstruction era and what was the future for Negroes in the U.S. One was the more intellectual side, W.E. Du Bois, who grew up in Boston, and the other was Booker T. Washington, who is from the South. And Booker T said that African Americans need to be in rural areas and they need to like take everything like the skills that they learned from slavery and turn it into work. He says we need to learn not to be worked, but to be workers. You know? And he says that's the only basis that you can build wealth, which then allows you the leisure and the free time to pursue, uh, you know, literary and philosophical means. He said there are too many people who know Greek and Latin, right? Who where they go back to their communities and like they're not useful, they're not helpful, they're not learning any skills. Where there are certain skills that we have lost since slavery, everyday things that we can do, right? Um, so these two different arguments about which direction to go, and so I started thinking about, like that each of us are fitted to do certain things, and our different environments we are in, there may be more opportunities to nurture some of the things that we can do than there are in other environments. And I think as we become more aware of those, right, that today in this day and age, if we're in an environment that doesn't feel like it's nourishing us or nourishing the parts of us that we'd like to be nourished, that we have the ability to change our environment, to move and go somewhere else.
Interesting. Well, it's okay, so not to take a divergence into like it's personal story, but I just have to say, like, okay, so one time I got taken away from all my stuff because I got put in the hospital. And for the month I was in the hospital, I like had all my manias that my chart would do, but like I couldn't get to my stuff. Like I couldn't get to my art supplies. So I was drawing with I had could get crayons in there, so I'm drawing with crayons. And I'm making all this amazing art, but it's just like the materials with which I was working with were just subpar. Like no one wants a crayon drawing, right?
Yeah.
If I can make Astro-Beads or something like that, like people want those, right? And it was just like
Yeah.
it just made me think of people in underprivileged areas or areas where they might have the work ethic of that you developed in slavery, like you were saying, but they can't get the materials with which to really take it to another level. And I think that's what.
But where did those the point I was trying to make is where did those materials come from? I think what Booker T. Washington was trying to say that they have to be built on a foundation of practical things. And that's why it's saying it's like so they're the Negro problem is they're trying to say we can acknowledge that these 5 million now more people have started at some kind of disadvantage, and there's going to be right there's going to be time where they have to climb out of the hole, and but when they get to the level surface, it's like then what? But the whole point is they had to acknowledge our training is to be worked, not to be workers. And so it's like the basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Until your basic needs are met, until those basic needs are met, you can't really think about the higher forms of happiness. And I think
Right.
that 73, that's that number of having the basic needs met. But the big question mark becomes, and it's a survival question, right? And I think this is where when we say that whites or blacks have certain advantages is like who has certain advantages to getting those basic needs met that allow the free time to do all the other things. But for a big part of our country, what allowed the white people to have time to do all the other things, right, were the slaves.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So the slaves were working on that first tier for the white people.
Exactly, and which allowed them to build wealth, to send all their kids to
Work
Europe.
on your own tier.
Exactly, exactly.
Now I'm
Yeah,
mad.
that's not
Okay.
what Bob Marley say, right? We get your corn, right? Brainwash education to make us the fools.
Um,
That was your word for our love, telling us of your God above. We're gonna chase those crazy bald heads out of town. Yeah. So
wow.
again, back to Mars, right? This is why you know police brutality.
Okay. So the next sentence talks about structural racism. She said the concept of structural racism allowed me to see how race is used to divvy up resources from classrooms to boardrooms. Um, So let's talk about structural racism. I guess that would be like when there was segregation. That was, because structural functionalism is a theory that says like how things are structured dictates how they will function, right? So it's like if you do segregation, like that's going to dictate how people function and whether or not they can get to each other and stuff like that. So that was definitely structural racism, you know,
Yeah,
and like
yeah,
like black people sitting in the back of the bus and all that kind of stuff.
yeah. Mhm.
What are current examples of structural racism?
I think the most obvious and it probably most pervasive in history is disenfranchisement in voting. And
What does that mean? I mean, like they like people can't get to the polls or something like that?
yeah, like making the polling hours times where working, more working class people have to be working and it's more inconvenient. It's making it more inconvenient for people in certain neighborhoods to be able to vote.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I
And
can't.
also it's different. Like when I grew up in Southern California, we had school busing. And so it was one of the ways that they attempted to level the playing field for education wise. And they had special schools that they spread through the whole city, the nice areas. but even still inside of that, inside the school, even though I was bused to a nice neighborhood, there were still like two tracks of classes, and it's like 90% of the people in the upper track were white, and majority of the people in the lower track were minorities.
Well, let's talk about structural racism in astrology. I mean, like Laura at Norwalk is fighting that because she keeps like putting African American people in lecturing positions, like she's doing it on purpose. But I do think there is a lack of diversity in astrology structurally.
I think there's a lack of more talk about what is the value of diversity. Because
Like
I think just
authors
in
just don't
general,
even talk about it.
well, I think just in general, and we can make the argument that there's a bunch of different types of astrology, and that that is a form of diversity, but but not really, because it's not like the different types exchange and share ideas. Maybe they might debate and have but to me, I can tell because of my diversity of being African American, being a male, being a professional athlete, that I have a completely different orientation to astrology than other people. And I can tell just the way I talk about it, people look at me and they're like, "That's not astrology," but I'm like, "What? Of course it is." And I think if we have more diversity, it's it may be painful in the beginning because if we're being honest about why diversity is so hard, because it's hard, right? That it's uncomfortable. We have to push through things and fight through assumptions and things that we've thought for so long, and we have to open our minds to that, that it requires a lot of effort. But I think the value is everything we do, and I think the value for astrology is astrology can become richer,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
able to touch us in more ways and help us solve more problems, a more diverse array of problems.
I so agree with you. Like the more diversity in astrology, the better. I mean, I think having a colorful palette in any field is the better way to go. I mean, I just, I want to know why there are less, lecturers who are, of diverse origins in astrology. Is it because of the lack of resources to get to the conference? Is it because of the, like, that what you were saying of like, the intelligence of African Americans isn't valued as much as like the physicality? Like what is it?
Well, we can say the intelligence, but the like when we have an idea of intelligence, it's not only that someone is art. We even have definitions about what is articulate and what is not. Where the true definition of articulate is someone has the ability to convey their ideas, but the way we interpret articulate is convey their ideas in a way that we've judged shows that they're intelligent.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of anxiety about standing up in front of a foreign people speaking a foreign language that they've known long, that they have more grasp of, because most of the astrology books we read, right, are written by white people,
Yeah.
right? It's just most of the language, we don't see our language, right? There's unique niche books, but we don't see our mindset, our way of, we don't see it that way. Another thing that I thought about related to this is, um, that religion is declining, but we still see that typically African Americans are more religious than white people. And part of the African American religion, it's all Christian religions, but right that astrology is of the devil. So for when I meet a lot of African American people, and
Oh.
the topic of astrology comes up, it's like they have some ambivalence. Even the ones that are into it, they have ambivalence about what is the preacher going to think. What is my grandma going to think?
Oh, interesting. That's actually a good one because churches admonish astrology all the time, and like we've talked in this show a lot about like the rich church tradition of African American people, and like maybe do you know who the Reverend Bishop Jordan is?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He was in. I went to Kepler with him. Like so, he's pretty well. I don't. Is he well known in astrology?
Well, he's not well known in astrology, but he's done a really good job of bringing astrology to his congregation,
Yeah,
and
he's
that's
a
really
prophet. He has a
yes,
Moon Uranus conjunction.
yeah, yeah. And so, in the church that I grew up, we had prophets, we had prophecy, and it's funny. I think my church upbringing is what makes me makes I think is what attracted me to astrology. Is I saw the same things that were available in what I grew up in. I saw for me a more resonant version of it in astrology. And so the way I do astrology, I mean, people can tell the way I do astrology is I kind of have a little bit of preacher in me, you
Yeah.
know, and a lot of people they don't think of astrology that way, so it's off-putting, but it's a diverse expression. I mean, I've been studying this for 20 years, so I know my stuff, but it's being filtered through my unique experiences.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. God, I can't believe you. How do you know the Reverend Bishop Jordan?
I had a good friend of mine who, when I started studying astrology, I started talking to her about it, and she went to his church.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it was cool. One time he and I went out to lunch because he wanted me to read his chart actually. Because I don't know why we were in school together. He's like, you need to read my chart. And I was like, all right. And he did some prophecies on me. But it's really cool because as a prophet, he's using astrology to do prediction, basically. Oh, this is a good segue into, and we have 5 minutes. Okay, let's talk about your prediction.
Oh yeah,
We got through like 3 pages of our book. Look how much left we have to deal with.
yeah, we're making it. We're making
Yeah. Look at this white guy who wrote it, Victor
it.
Ray.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So let's tell us about your prediction you made. You made your first prediction.
Yeah, I made my first public prediction. Yes, I did.
What are
So
you,
it's funny.
Nostradamus?
Well, I mean, I'm learning, teaching myself orrery, and I said best way to learn is, to do it, is to do it. Um, and so I thought every year I get asked to do a prediction for the Super Bowl, and I'm always like, I don't know, I have no idea who's going to win the Super Bowl. So I thought it would be fun if I didn't have to use my football expertise. I could just ask the chart. Right? And
Whoa.
so, and so I called my friend who has a sports podcast, and I said, I want to come on next week and do a Super Bowl prediction. So he said, okay. And I knew my question. My question was, are the Chiefs going to win again? Right? So I knew my question, but I didn't have the time yet. All right. So I was like, when is the hour? When is the moment of the question? And my son was in town, and we were talking, and randomly he got up to walk into the kitchen, and he turned around and he was like, so who do you got in the game this week, next week?
Oh.
And I was like, oh, well, no. I was like, I don't know. I haven't asked yet. All right. And I was like, okay, this is the moment. This is the moment. And so I cast the chart for the moment. And my orary teacher, he says that for a chart to be radical, there has to be something in it that it's speaking to you. You know? And so the nature of my question was, are the Chiefs going to win again? And I pulled the chart. It was 29 degrees Leo on the ascendant. Right. And some people say a chart that late or really early on the ascendant, you can't read. My teacher says every chart that says something to you, you can read. And because my question and the nature of my question was about, are the Chiefs going to win again? I interpreted as the first testimony that 29 degrees on the ascendant, the end of a Leo, the end of a dynasty. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, The next testimony, the ruler of Leo, the sun was in the sixth house in Aquarius. And when you first look, the sun, I think, was at 11 degrees. 11 degrees Aquarius. Jupiter was in the 10th house at 11 degrees Gemini. So when you first see, right, the ruler of the ascendant trine Jupiter in the 10th, it's like that's a testimony that, okay, this team's probably going to win. But in orary, we only use applying aspects. And the sun had just passed, it
Oh.
was just passed. So it was separating. So this idea of, okay, that they were the best. And the other thing that jumped out was Uranus was into the ninth house conjunct the midheaven. Yeah. So my judgment, right, and also a majority of the planets were on the right side of the chart. Best player on the Eagles is an Aquarius whose birthday is 2 days after the game. So probably the league MVP. So my judgment was great game, wonderful game. It's going to seem like the Chiefs are going to win again, and there's going to be some change at the end, and the Eagles will come out on top.
Whoa. Okay, so you guys heard it here. That's Ricky's prediction. Wow, I like how you made a little storyline for the game. That's a cool prediction there.
Yeah, yeah. So, but we were talking about this, right? Is like to give the anxiety about am I right or am I wrong, or the production and the presentation of the prediction. And I like to show that you're a serious astrologer, and I love that idea, right? To approach the game as an astrologer. I feel like for me, I'm growing up. I'm growing up as an astrologer.
Yeah, you can be the NFL's astrologer. You
I
know,
could. I mean,
every
anyone was like fitted for that role, I think I could figure it out.
man, I can't wait to send you your Aries present, man. I've been waiting months for this. We're sun's almost in Pisces, so we're like almost there. But then I gotta wait till the sun's at the end of Aries. I don't know. I don't want to give too much away, but it has to do with football. Well, Ricky, I hope that you continue to make a win-win with me because I just seeing you on Wednesdays just it's freaking awesome.
Yeah, amen to that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't even know when the Super Bowl is, but when it happens, I'm gonna be checking your prediction.
Actually, I'll be in Portland for the Super Bowl.
What?
Yeah, I'm doing an event, a party, Super Bowl party.
Oh, well, if you want to come get some photos taken, I can hire a photographer. No, no pressure. I know you're busy.
What kind of photos?
Promo photos of you and me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll see what my schedule's like. If I have some extra time, I'd love to.
Okay, yeah, we should get some shots of us.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Since we're producing a best friendship. No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding. I'm all like making you be my friend. It's so fun.
I love it.
All right. Well,
All
Rick,
right.
I'll see you later.
Yeah.
All right, cool.